All right. Good evening. My name is Michael Brown. I am the Community and Economic Development Director for the Village of Greenville. And this evening, you're probably here because you received a mailing or you saw information on our Facebook page about the meeting tonight. The meeting tonight is, we're talking about sub-area planning for a specific area in town. And we'll get to that. So if you're not here for that, you're more than welcome to stay. You don't have to leave. We may have a couple people online as well. And so at the end of the meeting, when we go through the questions components, we'll start with anybody online, have them type in their questions into the chat box, and then I'll read through those and answer them. And then we'll go to the audience here with any questions. I'll ask people to come up and speak from the mic so everyone can hear as well as people online. So with that being said, we will get started. Oh. I just want to make sure that everybody online can hear us. There's only one person online, so hopefully they're able to hear us. So a little background into this planning process that we're engaging in. In 2019, Greenville adopted its 2040 Comprehensive Plan, which guides future growth and development. This presentation will be available online, so anyone that wasn't here tonight can go back and review it, or if you're interested in checking out some of these hyperlinks that are within the document, you can do so as well. Greenville's been successful in implementation of its plan, as it has accomplished 87% of its action items or projects scheduled within the first 2 years. So typically you'll hear, why do people do planning? Plans just sit on the shelf. This plan is being used, it's being implemented, and the Village Board and Planning Commission are really striving to continue to implement that plan. The action items and projects that have been completed so far have built a foundation for future development opportunities, and it provides the Planning Commission and Village Board with the tools to make more informed decisions related to growth and development, which is important. This plan helps guide that those development decisions so that they aren't made haphazardly. They're informed based on public input, development community input, staff, and elected and appointed officials input. So this evening, and the project that we're looking at for this year is part of action item 4C-2. On December 20th, 2021, the Planning Commission made the decision to develop sub-area plans for specific neighborhoods in the community, as they felt these areas had the most development pressure and could develop sooner than other areas. These plans will assist property owners, developers, staff, appointed and elected officials with being proactive in making those decisions and proactively planning for future development instead of being reactive when a developer comes in. Specifically in this particular area, we had a development proposal a few months ago that came in. There was a lot of reaction to it. And so we're trying to get ahead of those reactions by getting that information now and that input now to be able to better plan for these areas in the future. Framing concept 4C, vibrant neighborhoods, will be used as a guide along with other components of the comprehensive plan to help guide the development of the sub-area plans. So I'm going to click on this one here and hopefully it will pop up on this screen. Yeah. Bear with me here. Put that up. So the letters that you most likely received had this document in it. So this is a document that we'll be using to kind of guide this planning process, as well as other components and sections of the comprehensive plan. But this really gives you a good idea of kind of what we're looking at this evening, as well as this planning process moving forward throughout the year. So really, it talks about some real general concepts, moves into policies and strategies, identifies the different areas of focus that Greenville should focus on over the coming years. And then on the second page really kind of talks about some specific action items, one of those being 4C-2, right here where we're talking about creating these neighborhood plans, as well as some additional detail about characteristics of development, neighborhoods, and what could be expected and should be expected when developments do take place in the community. So again, the specific area that we're talking about this evening is Subarea Plan C. That's this triangle up here, which is at the northwest corner of Mayflower and Everglade. And the focus of these plans, they're not going to be large documents, numbers of pages. We're really focusing on 1 to maybe a few pages of a document to help really guide the community and the future planning of these areas. We want it to be very basic and simple so that it's easy to follow, and we want it to be able to be used as a guide for, again, elected and appointed officials as well as the development community based on the residents and the public's input. The areas that we want to focus on are in relation to general land uses and layouts, transportation networks, and neighborhood design characteristics. So as we go forward with this, kind of keep those concepts in mind. We're not really getting really deep into the weeds on the development that we're looking at, kind of keeping it high level to be able to use as a guide for when development does get proposed, and we can say, hey, these are the things we've talked about. These are the concepts that we are acceptable of. Development community, we like you to try to fit your development within these guidelines in this mold. Again, another look at that area more specifically, kind of an aerial overview, kind of this triangular area would cover that. Again, northeast corner of Mayflower and Everglade. As well here, we have a map link. So this is a map that's open to the public. It's on our website. You can click on this and it will theoretically come up. There we go. So this area, it'll come up, and unfortunately it's not cooperating right now, but it'll bring up an aerial map here of the area. You can zoom into where you want to look at. Usually there is a table of contents or a legend on the side here. Here we go. It's just getting in. And then you can turn on different layers to look at what's going on the property. Environmental layers, zoning layers, future land use layers. You can drill down to looking at individual properties. It's probably just taking a little bit to load based on all the other technology going on. So this is a useful tool as well if you want to take a closer look at some of these areas that we have available. The next concepts I want to talk about are looking at the future land use within the suburban residential area, or tier 1 of the comprehensive plan. When Greenville developed its comprehensive plan, it broke out its geography of the community into 3 different tiers of development. Tier 1, or what we call the future suburban residential, really focuses where we want to focus 90% of our development over the next 20 years in. This is encompassed on the east side of town in this area, and because it's near to nearby services, road connections, other utilities, and that's where we kind of want to focus that from an efficient land use planning perspective. This table here comes directly out of the comprehensive plan and really focuses on the different the district intent, core uses, location characteristics, and visual characteristics of neighborhoods within tier 1 or the suburban residential area. So as you're thinking about this specific area, the Subarea Planning C area that we're talking about, think about these concepts as well. What do I want to see here? What don't I want to see here? What makes sense in this location? These are kind of some guides to think about that would be acceptable in this particular area as it develops in the future. And we'll be taking these concepts and building them into this planning process, as well as the input that you provide throughout this. The other concepts that we'll be looking at are neighborhood design principles. Again, this was in that handout that you received in your mailing. Again, these are more specific to the kind of the design of the neighborhood, walkability, are there trails or sidewalks? What does the neighborhood look like? Is there green space, park space? How do people get around? What do the homes look like? So those are some of the concepts as well to consider when we're looking at these planning areas. So next I want to kind of talk about the next steps. And again, this is really important. The first next steps are really getting your input. I wanted to get your feedback on the project in the area, understand what do you want to see happen here, what don't you want to see happen here, with the understanding that, some people may say, I don't want to see anything develop in this area. I'd rather just have it stay the way it is. That obviously is an option, but probably not the reality. At some point in time, much of this area in this specific area will develop. And that's why I want to be proactive and come up with a plan that's going to be acceptable to the village, its residents, as well as the development community. So what I'll be asking you, as well as public that aren't here this evening, anyone that wants to participate, to provide feedback by March 4th. And there's a few different ways that you can do that. One of the ways is just by mail. If you don't have a computer, you don't use a computer, if you want to just write something up, mail it in or drop it off, you can do that and address it to me. You can email me. My email is here on the screen as well if you want to provide comments that way. Otherwise, we have an online survey that kind of has a map component to it, a little more interactive. And so I kind of wanted to walk through this and kind of explain how this works. And this is another option that you can use. All right, so this is what the I'm gonna have to do this back here. Then I can control it better. So with this, you can click on this link. It'll ask you for your name, your address, email, and phone number. And then down here there's a map component. So on here, it'll tell you that you have to hit the control button, keep it held down to be able to zoom in and out. What you're able to do is you can kind of see, it brings you to the area of the study area that we're looking at. Right now, it's just kind of a blank background with some streets on it. If you go up into this corner here, you can actually change the base map or the background. So if you want to look at an aerial image to kind of understand where things are, there's a lot of different options here that you can use. So I'm just going to click on this one. Again, it'll bring up that aerial imagery as an option to look at. And then you can really zoom in and look at the area. And then what this will do is this blue flag will pop up, and you can move this wherever you want. So if you want to make a specific comment on a particular property or area within the planning area, you can do that. You simply just hold the control button down, drag, and then click, and it'll take you to where you want it to kind of make your comment. And if this is a particular area that you want to focus on, then you go down into the comments box, type in your comments, and then hit submit. Now there is 1,000 character max on this, so it's not meant to be used as a novel. It's really meant for some short, concise sentences and ideas here, so that we can, when we analyze this data, we can kind of collect it and start categorizing and seeing what comments come back that are similar to one another, dissimilar. What are the common themes that are coming through this? So that is the comment component. Then what I will do is we have then online survey results. So not only can you provide your survey comments, but you can actually see what other people are commenting on. So we'll click on this and pull this guy up. So as you can see, there's a couple different areas on here. That's because we have two different planning areas that we're focusing on this year. We have another meeting coming up for the other planning area in a couple weeks. But again, we're going to focus on our area up here, this kind of triangle or sub-area plan C area. So anytime that a comment is listed and that point is put somewhere specifically, a little dot will show up. And then you can actually click on those dots. Again, this is just a test, but the only thing that will show up there is the person's name and the comments. So when you put in your address, email, and phone number, that information won't show up here. It'll just show your name and your comments. So then, as you know, after you make comments or even before you make comments, you can go on here and see what other people are saying. Maybe maybe there's a lot of similarities that someone else is commenting on that you have a lot of same concerns about or want to see things happen. So it's a real more interactive way to see how other people are commenting on it. And then ultimately too, on this page, if you were to click on here and you had already made a comment and then you start reading some other people's comments and you say, well, gee, I really didn't think about that. So I'd like to go back and comment on that particular item that I missed before. You can actually get back to that survey by these links at the top of the page here. So if you click on that, again, it'll bring up that survey. You could fill out the information and then add another comment if, like I said, if you forgot something or you found other comments that you liked, you wanted to respond on. All right.
Shaded an area? Can we like make an area and shade it in and say, I'm talking about this area, or is it just points?
It's just points, unfortunately. Yeah, we don't have a lot of capability functionality from that standpoint. All right. So after we gather that input and that data, then staff will analyze that. Again, try to find those commonalities, make sure, group things together. What are the main points that people are saying and want to hear about. Again, we have another planning meeting in a couple weeks for a different area. We're going to be using a similar process for that. So at the end of both this period of March, of the ending period of March 4th for collecting comments, we'll have another 2-week period for that other particular area. Once we have all those comments from both areas, staff will organize those comments, bring them back to our planning commission, have a conversation with them and say, here's the general results of what we heard from the public. Talk to them about that, get their feedback, and then get some direction from them on, what are the things that they want to focus on based on the public's comment, based on their thoughts and ideas, as well as, the common elements within the comprehensive plan. After that, so I've kind of put general timelines as far as when we would be kind of doing some of these things. They aren't set in stone, just kind of timelines to kind of keep the process moving. So again, finish all the getting the feedback back in March, be able to talk with the Planning Commission initially by March or April. Next, we would then start developing concepts based on the feedback from the public and the comprehensive plan and Planning Commission's comments as well. That'll take a few months. Then staff will bring those concepts back to the Planning Commission later this summer, say, here's some ideas based on what we heard from the public. What do you think? How does this look? Depending on what direction they like to go, they may say, hey, that looks great, or maybe tweak this based on what we've heard and what we've seen. And then again, we'll kind of round that back up with going back out to the public again and asking for your input again, right? You've given us input during this month. We want to come back to you and say, here's what we heard from you. We want to make sure that what we're hearing is accurate based on the information that you've provided us. Then again, we'll come back to the Planning Commission, provide that feedback to them again, say, here's what we heard back from the public on the concepts. How do you want to move forward? Does it make sense? Do we need to make tweaks? Kind of a back and forth. And eventually we'll hold a public hearing to eventually adopt the plan. And that plan will then be adopted as part of our comprehensive plan so that in the future, as the village does make decisions on planning and development and growth, these concepts and this plan will be incorporated for them to be able to use as a tool. Leanne.
Will we get letters again letting us know when that input on July, August input again? Will we get letters letting us know what time or what meeting?
We haven't decided on what that process is going to look like yet. We may have a meeting, we may not have a meeting. We may just ask for public input via the internet or email or feedback. But definitely looking at those mailings again, because obviously we want to get the word out. Not everybody has the time to keep track of what's going on in the village, so definitely we'll be able to send out a mailing saying, here's information, here's where you can go access what's been put together, and again, provide your feedback and comments. Because again, the idea of having these specific areas, it really affects not only the property owners that live in this area, but also properties outside of the area, right? So if you live across the street on the other side of Everglade, obviously your property is already developed and you're in a subdivision, but what happens to the north of you, you may be concerned about and want to provide that input. So again, stay tuned by keeping an eye on the project website, which is right here. Hopefully many of you have visited that already, but I will pull this up. So this is the project website. Again, kind of explains how the project started, what the process is, the meetings that we're having tonight, and then in the future as well for the other area, and the kind of that public input process. After this evening tomorrow, I will actually put the online survey link on the page here so that it's accessible. Again, if you were to click on the online survey results, that's that map that took you to see those results. There are links on that map to get access to survey as well. And then again, this will kind of be the landing page for the project. So you can kind of see what the status is, how things are going, and kind of any new updates that are taking place. One other way to provide input immediately this evening, and we'll do this after question and answer session, is I've got a couple aerial maps out on the tables here. This is the old school way of doing it, where you sit at a map and look at it, and I've got some sticky notes and some pens. You can write a quick note on here, stick it onto the map. You can write on the map, you can write in the margins on the map, whatever you're comfortable with. Again, if you don't have a computer access, you're not comfortable with technology, and you rather just write something here and stick it on there, again, we'll take this back, take some pictures of it, and record the information to provide for the Plan Commission in the future upcoming meetings. So what I would like to do now is open it up to questions. And what I'll do is I'll turn the podium around. If you have a question, you can come up to the podium, ask it so that the people online can hear it, and I'll stand up here and be able to answer those questions. So again, if anyone has questions, don't be bashful.
On the maps that are linked to this, does it show where the official high water line is marked? Or at what elevation is that?
No, so that kind of detail we weren't able to put on the survey maps. Now on I'll bring this one back up. On the Greenville master map, which is a link, and this is on our website, there are a lot of different layers here, and I'll try to zoom in so we can see them a little bit better. There's a lot of different information that you can turn on in here. Probably the ones that you're going to be most concerned with are, there's a zoning layer here, so you can actually see what the properties are zoned. That's one layer. The future land use layer is another layer that might be useful. Again, this is areas in Tier 1, which we talked about. There are, so if you scroll down, there's a county zoning layers. So there are a lot of layers that we get from the county that are directly linked to the county's website. And under there is what's called contours layer. So this will open up those contours, and you can see kind of what the elevations are at different points in the land. It takes a little bit to load because it's a large file and it covers the entire county, but that is an option for elevations.
Thank you.
Again, there are other environmental features that you may want to see. Stream navigability, navigable streams. We also have the floodplain. We have wetlands that are in here. We've got DNR wetlands you can turn on and kind of see what's officially mapped. Now, just because they're officially mapped doesn't mean that everything's showing there, so there could be more things out there as well, but these are tools that we use in the planning process and the design process when we're going through and working with developers. So there's a lot of different components in here that you can use and turn on and off if you so choose. Any other questions?
Why was Area C chosen to be first on this?
So the Planning Commission chose it because they felt it had a lot of development pressure. They felt that it could develop quicker than other areas in town. And so they wanted to be proactive in getting ahead of those development proposals from coming in instead of having to be reactive when they are presented.
Can you give us an idea of what's been come in as a proposal so far, or what people want to build there or do with that?
Sure. So recently, I'll pull this back up. I'll just pull up the aerial. I don't have the information, but and these properties here, this property and this property is owned by one person. They came in and proposed a single family subdivision development late last year. I think it was around October, November. It came before our Plan Commission for review. They ultimately, at the time, denied the development request because they wanted to see some changes to the plan. So that developer, they've been invited to be a part of this process, obviously, because their property is within the area. So they are obviously interested in what the public has to say, to understand what people are thinking about, and trying to, change their development and modify it to be more consistent with, what the Planning Commission and Village Board want to see, as well as the residents.
And was it a subdivision kind of like across the street, or was it smaller houses and smaller lots? Or?
So it was probably similar to what's across the street here. The minimum lot size for a single family development is 13,500 square feet. So that was the smallest lots that were in there from the single family standpoint. There obviously were larger lots in there depending on the layout and the design. But again, there were people that came out to a public meeting in that when that development was proposed and provided some feedback to the Planning Commission, the developer. So that developer has taken that feedback and again wants to get feedback throughout this process to understand how to best design a subdivision to develop the area.
Has there been industrial options too that people want to build?
No. So our future land use planning for this area in Tier 1 is really focused on residential. Possibly very small neighborhood commercial could be possible. But more than likely, this area will develop as residential only. It won't be industrial. It won't be large, retail, commercial. One, it doesn't make sense from an economic standpoint. It's too far off the beaten path from major state highways. So industrial users won't come up this way to develop. Actually, the industrial area is, I'll turn on the future land use map. As you can see, that all this area in yellow is that residential area. If we go further south, south of the railroad tracks, this purple area, that's kind of that industrial business area that is focused on for future growth and development area. So really anything south of the tracks is kind of that area where we're looking at, industrial or business commercial development.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And again, if there's anybody online, there's a couple of people online. If you have questions, if you want to type them into the question box, then I can answer those as well if you have any. Yes, ma'am.
So it wasn't too long ago, I read that it was supposed to be farmland. What has changed, I guess? And my second question is, what happened with the CB extension?
Sure. So as far as the farmland goes, when I started with the village back in 2018, they were just in the process of updating their comprehensive plan, which we have today. Prior to that, I don't recall what was specifically called out in that area, but it's always been intended that eventually, the east side of town where the tier 1 is, that's where the residential development would be focused. So this area has always kind of been identified as future residential. It just became a matter of when's the right time, what's the right development. And that's where, with zoning regulations, the community has a lot more control in saying yes or no to a development. Prior to updating our comprehensive plan and updating our zoning regulations, residential subdivisions and residential development could occur in agriculturally zoned property. What we've done now is made it more difficult to develop those areas. It has to be rezoned to residential in order to be able to develop for any kind of residential or a subdivision. And so therefore, zoning is a discretionary decision by a community. So it gives the community more control in saying yes or no to a development, where before, under the old zoning regulations, this property, these areas are mostly zoned agriculture. It would be really difficult for the community to say no to a development because of those zoning regulations. So we've actually put some controls in place to help control that growth. As far as the CB extension, what will be happening with this area as well as the other area, which is south of the tracks that we'll be focusing on, that was another reason that the Planning Commission wanted to focus on these two areas because of the CB extension. We've been having conversations with the county of Outagamie County as well as Grand Chute to talk about that CB extension. Over a decade ago, there were conversations that started, plans that were proposed, but nothing ever took hold. And so we started that process over a year ago of that recommunication with the different organizations. We've been having conversations with our village board. They've given us some direction, and I think hopefully through this planning process, we'll be able to come to some final decisions on what that's going to look like, where County Highway CB is going to go, what that transportation network is going to look like, and how that will be developed. So as part of this planning process, we hope to flush those details out and provide a better picture for not only residents in the area, but also property owners that are waiting for some decisions on these types of questions so that they know how to develop their property.
Okay, and Harvey Byers land, this last year, it grew up into Canadian thistles, like half of it was Canadian thistles. And somebody came through and plowed after the thistles had gone to seed and the seed had blown away. What do you do about something like that? I mean, this is pretty major, pretty noxious weeds.
Sure. So we do have a grass and weed regulations in town. I unfortunately am not the person that oversees that. Our Public Works Department is. So if you ever have complaints or concerns about grass and weeds such as that, you can reach out to our Public Works Department. And the specific person over there is Erica March. She is the person that kind of oversees the grass and weed regulations. And then she can look into, the specific area. Some of the regulations depend on, what the zoning is, what the development is of the property, if it's within the sewer service area or not. So there's some different, regulations that guide that.
I had called here and they said there isn't any regulation at all.
Okay, well, I'm not sure if you
They
talked
said
to.
within 50 feet of the road. That's
Okay.
all.
So there is, and what I can do is just quickly show you that section of the code, and then just so that you're aware it does exist. So this is our municipal code. If you're on our website and you click on the municipal code link here, it'll open up that code, and then you're going to want to look at Chapter 307, Weeds and Managed Natural Landscapes. So this is the chapter that would regulate those grass and weeds concerns and complaints.
Okay,
Okay?
okay. That's it.
I'd like to know, you said you looked into the plan. Was that a plan that was done prior by the community people, or was it just done by the town?
The comprehensive plan? Yep, so there was a public involvement process throughout that planning process. So we gathered input from the public. the entire community, and really we went beyond the community, went to different government agencies and nonprofits that we work with. So we gathered input from a lot of different sources over the course of a year plus long
What year was
process.
that?
This was, it started in 2018 and went into 2019. So the process started about March of 2018, and then the plan was adopted in July of 2019.
Okay, I sat on one of the green plans, Keep the Green in Greenville, prior to that.
Okay.
That land was never set up to be developed. That was farmland. And what is going to happen to the swampland when all that building gets up there? You can't take care of the water now. How is that going to affect it? Did you take a look at that?
Sure, and those are obviously the things that will be looked at when detailed engineering is done for development. So for example, that development that I referenced, these couple of properties that came in, they just submitted what's called a concept plan. So really just, it's a one-page document that shows general lot layouts, street layouts. There's really no detail and there's no deep dive into the engineering and to the water concerns, of it. They obviously, they plan for what's called a stormwater facility to capture all the stormwater that comes off of the rooftops and the roads to go into the facility. And then, they obviously have to plan and meet the regulations to be able to discharge that into the swamp area. So those are all things that get looked at. Generally, when the development takes place, a lot of those flooding concerns are improved within that development area. But obviously we have to look down the road and literally down the stream to say, all right, now that we're discharging the water here, by state statute, we have to discharge at the same rate as prior to development. So the idea is that if you have a certain flow of water coming off your farm fields and green space area, say it's coming off there at a number of 5, when the development happens, you have to make sure that you're discharging at that same rate.
Okay, and when the development happens. In the meantime, what happens, you're going to have to fix the problem after the fact. And Greenville hasn't been noted to fix the problem after the fact. If it isn't fixed before the development starts, it's not going to happen after.
Sure, and I understand that. Unfortunately, I don't know all the history with a lot of the flooding in the area. I know that there's flooding concerns around different parts of town. I don't know the full history behind all those things. But obviously our goal with any future development that comes in is we want to make sure that we're not creating any more problems. And if we can try to fix the problems through the actual development.
Okay, one last question. When the developer came in, did you already commit that, yes, we can develop this? And they are all set to thinking that they're going to be able to develop?
Nope. That's why we go through the concept planning process and the development review process. So the only thing that tells the developer that they may be able to develop an area is the comprehensive plan. So that, again, like I said, we use that comprehensive plan to guide the village and the elected and appointed officials to make informed decisions about what could be developed here. What could we say yes to? What can we say no to? But again, it's still a discretionary decision. So even if a development does come in and it's the greatest development in the world, if the planning commission, ultimately the village board, feel it's not the right time or the right place for it, they can always say no. But again, with the understanding that we know that the land in here will develop eventually. So by being proactive and kind of planning for it ahead of time, we can be ready for when those requests do come in.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anybody else?
I mean, you keep saying that the land will be developed eventually, so it kind of sounds like you're already to the conclusion that for some reason there was a decision already made that this land will be developed in this corner of the property. I guess my question is that why is the push now from the town to develop this area?
Well, it's not a push from the town to develop the area. It's a push to be ready for when development does come knocking on the door.
It's the same thing. I mean, it's kind of, that's what you've been saying the whole time. Once development comes, we want to be ready for it. So
right.
Do we need to be ready for development in this area? I guess is my question. Why do we need to be looking to develop this area?
Well, and again, even if development does come, even after we have this plan, like I said, the village could still say no, right? They still have that option to say no. But they want to be ready so that when it does come, they aren't in a situation where they were a few months ago, kind of reacting to a proposal, right? We want to make this more of a group effort to say, yes, there may be people that say, I don't want to see this develop ever. The reality is at some point in time, it's going to develop, whether it's in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, or 50 years. And again, those plans could change, right? I mean, if in 5 years, the economy can change, the marketplace can change, new technologies can change, the way we develop and live may change. So even while we're doing a plan right now, that plan could change in the future. And that's the beauty of the planning process, is it's ever changing and should be fluid. It doesn't have to be concrete and static. I guess hopefully I answered your question.
Well, I mean, you keep saying in reality, it's going to be developed. So that's, I mean, from listening to those words, it's like we've already come to a conclusion that we're going to develop it. But now we're looking at how to develop it.
Right.
Is what it is. So it's not a when or however. It's in reality, we're going to develop this land. Will be developed within a year or 5 years or 10 years. So how can we get with everybody else to agree with us to develop this land? Is kind of how I'm seeing this situation going. Like it's a foregone conclusion that we're already going to develop it. That's still, if that makes sense.
Okay, sure.
And there's no, I mean, that's, and then again, it comes down to the basic question of why are we pushing to develop this part of Greenville? Again, with the swamp there and everything else, it doesn't seem like there's not a whole lot of land in general there. I mean, there's a few, I mean, those are two big properties there. As you go farther north into that part of the triangle, they're all private properties in there. So pushing further into the swamp and into that area doesn't make a whole lot of sense, in my opinion, to go that way. We've talked about before and on your website, live in Greenville, work in Greenville, trying to get that concept. Why do we need to develop more or have more developments in Greenville? It comes down to the basic question, not just in this area, but just in general. Why are we pushing to develop more houses in Greenville?
Right.
Is there a need to?
Right. Well, and I can tell you from, is there a need to in Greenville? That's a policy decision, obviously, by the Planning Commission and Village Board. From a market perspective, there's a housing shortage. That's not a secret. The data proves that. Again, whether or not Greenville wants to see additional housing developments take place in Greenville, that's a policy decision. And I guess by having the foresight to look at this area and say, all right, we want to be ready when something does come in, even if we're going to say no, right? Like I said, they could say no to any development that comes in. They don't have to say yes, but they want to be ready for it and be proactive as opposed to reactive. Again, it may never develop. That's always an option. And again, it depends on, who are the elected officials at the time, right? I mean, there's elections every so often. Leaders change from time to time. Policy decisions change based on a number of factors.
All right, thanks.
So if that gets developed, what's going to happen with the sewer and water going down Everglade? Are you guys going to force people to hook up to the sewer and water, or has there been any planning on that?
So I know that the village board has been talking about those concepts of hookups. I don't know the specifics on the final details, but I know they have been discussing what does that look like? How does that play into the future when water and sewer are put along the roadways? I wasn't involved with all those conversations, but I know that they are talking about that right now. I believe the concept, and I don't know, Jack, you're in the back if you want to comment on that or not. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know there's been some conversations about it. Yeah.
I'll sit up here in case there's other questions. Perfect. My name's Jack Anderson. I'm the village president. You asked about whether or not you'd be required to hook up. It all depends on what your agreement was at the time when the water and sewer was put in. So if you weren't required to hook up at the time when water and sewer was put in on Everglade, then you wouldn't be required to. Anytime if there was some type of assessment, special assessment put on, There's a term that's on those.
When the development went in, I live on the other side of Everglade. When that development went in, they put a special assessment on us for that development, even though we had no benefit from it. A lot of people complained after we paid our assessment, and they said, no, you don't have to pay it. We'll let you defer it.
Okay. So the staff is looking at those special assessments that have been deferred. I don't know what the terms are for your deferment. Do you know?
We paid ours.
Okay, yours is paid, so there might be others that haven't, that have deferred it, and we're looking at those deferments and moving forward with how we're going to pursue those special assessments.
When the first development went on the other side of Everglade, I went to the town meeting and was told that as soon as the development goes all the way down to Mayflower, we'll run sewer and water right down Everglade. That never happened. In fact, you didn't take into account the houses that were right along Everglade when you put in the sewer and water for the development.
So when the town or now village did, I wasn't involved in those.
I know you weren't
practices
involved in
then.
it, but
So I actually don't have the map memorized on where our water and sewer laterals and mains run.
back then they told me our sewer and water would be on the other side of Everglade, behind the houses that were along there.
Okay. And is that indeed where it is? Do you know?
It's where you guys are gonna run it, because there's nothing there now.
There's nothing there at all. Michael, do you have anything that shows that? The water and
I don't
sewer
have anything.
services?
I don't have anything available right now, unfortunately.
You know, I thought at the
I think-
time, if you're doing that development behind all those houses on Everglade, give them the option to hook up. And
Right,
that cost can be split
right.
between
Yeah,
all the
that's
homes that go in the subdivision.
right. That's exactly what we're looking at. We actually are developing policies around that for future development so that not only the developers, but those that are existing homeowners or property owners know exactly what the assessment policies are coming into it, instead of having to react to some new idea that somebody brought forward on how to pay for something. We're trying to establish policies around that. And it wouldn't be that you guys would be paying 100% of that type of effort. Usually this, like we just went through a couple of them, and it was more about paying for the lateral, not the main. And then if once you want to hook up and are ready to, then you'd pay for that too, going into your home. But
Yeah, back then they assured me that it wouldn't cost as much. Like if we had split the cost out with all the houses that went in and the developer, they said, no, you're not gonna pay anymore. But, you know, yeah, maybe 20 houses paying
so
for
I
it.
know that there's water and sewer that goes down Greenwood down to Everglade and then to the west. But I know you're asking about east of Greenwood towards Mayflower, and I don't know what services are on that parcel. Like I said, I don't have that memorized, but there is a project in 2022 this year that will be running water and sewer from 15 up Mayflower to Everglade.
So would you force people to hook up, or would they have the option?
It is
So
through,
went down Everglade.
they have an option to hook up through a certain term, and once that term expires, then they have to hook up. Those terms can be 10 years, can be 20 years. So a lot of times somebody's water or sewer may fail, their well may fail, their sewer may fail, and that would be an ideal time for them to hook up, because it's less expensive to hook up than it is to put in a whole new system.
Yeah, and you know, that's happened along Everglade. Neighbors at various times have tried to get sewer and water run down there, but his fails, so he fixes his, so he doesn't want it done anymore.
Right, then they don't want it in, right?
The people.
Because they have a brand new system, and that's why we want to put in that
Yeah, I don't
deferment
blame
for
him.
a
I don't
term.
want one either.
Right, right. When you just have revamped or done, put in a whole new system, you don't want to have to spend money on something that you don't need necessarily until something fails.
So who
And that-
determines what time period you, like, if you
The
have
village
20
board.
years?
The elected officials and village board at the time.
Okay. So is there gonna be a plan developed on what's gonna happen with sewer
That's
and water?
exactly why we're here tonight. This is about planning and being proactive ahead of developments so that we know what needs to happen instead of having a big surprise.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've ever heard the term about failing to plan is planning to fail.
Yeah.
So Michael is here helping with planning. It's not necessarily anything that's happening. He said 1, 10, 20, 50 years, but it could be never. But if we don't have a plan in place, then we will have something come up that we don't expect, and it will be a surprise. So we'd rather have this plan in place, have feedback from all of you, what you would like to see in that area, including lot sizes. I know in September when we were here, Tim, I remember you coming up and speak very passionately about the area. It was talked about with the lot sizes. Why don't we do more of a transitional lot sizes? Some of these lots along Everglade are an acre or over an acre. Why are we putting a third of an acre lot right behind them? And from a planning commission, Leanne's here, she can nod her head for me. We agreed we should have some more transitional sized lots, transitioning from those larger lots into something that might be smaller inside that development, or maybe it transitions from an acre and a quarter, acre and a half to an acre sized lot. And then the other side of the road might be 3/4 of an acre, but we got to keep it at that because we don't want to be moving from, somebody's got potential that they've got 15 neighbors because they've got a parcel that's long and narrow where the house is on. They got 15 new neighbors just because of that. And more transitional type thing. That's exactly why we're here tonight, to talk about what you have is an opportunity to give feedback on what you'd like to see. And yeah, we will take that into account if something does come forward from a developer. I don't know if the developer that we talked with in September with the concept plan they had is even still interested. I haven't heard boo about that, but Michael is our staff member that's there to take it on. So I, just like you as a citizen, rely on our staff to talk to these people and then bring these concepts and beyond that forward to our planning commission, to our village board. But if we don't have any type of plan, then we do get kind of pushed around sometimes by a developer, and we do see things that we don't like come in. So that's why we're here tonight, to make sure that our opinions can be heard and that we really have an opportunity to make our own footprint on what this should be.
When our neighbor wanted to put in expand his garage, it was on his home. So he had to come over to my house, show me his plans and get my approval and talk to me before I built his garage. Will these developers be required to do the same thing with the neighbors that it impacts around them?
Well, actually, you have that same opportunity at public hearings prior to those. So whenever we go through,
What if you can't make that meeting?
then you should talk with Michael and give your feedback to Michael in advance, or whoever's in Michael's role, if he won't be here forever. But hopefully he's here for a long time and is able to help us out through this planning process. But yeah, this is one of those
we're impacted
opportunities.
more by development than we are by a garage going up next to us.
Absolutely.
But he has to come and talk to us. I think maybe the developer should
Right.
have the same plan.
Right. So one thing you should know, Michael tried to talk about it. I'll try to explain it again. One thing that we've learned is that through the zoning process, we do have a way of managing development. Michael uses the word control. I like to use the word manage. I don't feel like it's a really strong word to say control, but we can manage the growth. We can manage the development in our community through the zoning process. So many of you might have gotten a postcard or even had your property rezoned in the last, 2 years? So we've identified the fact that rezoning is a really good way to manage our growth, our residential growth, even our commercial and industrial growth. If we have something that's zoned as agricultural, we'd like to leave it there. And then we've set some policies around our ordinances to say you can't build a subdivision on something that's zoned as agricultural. You have to rezone it. In order to rezone it, you get to come to the planning commission and have a public hearing about the rezoning and talk, and that's public participation opportunity. But it's also the planning commission's opportunity to say, we don't necessarily like exactly what you have in there in your concept plan or in your proposed plan. We'd like to see some more transitional lots, or we'd like to see a park put in. We'd like to see some walkways going through, or a trail of some sort to allow people to have some recreational opportunities. So if you heard Michael before talk about the zoning and how crucial that is to our community, yeah, it's absolutely a way for us to manage this growth. And residential growth in the past 15, 20 years in Greenville, we really haven't had to go out and market for people to come and develop in Greenville. We've had a lot of growth, and we went from, Leanne, help me out, about 3,000 in population in 2000, year 2000, somewhere in there, ballpark-ish. Yeah. So Leanne remembers it was in thousands. So if you see the signs that just went up because we're incorporated now, 12,500 people. And we don't have a problem getting residents moving in here, but we would like to have a plan for when these developers come in. And truthfully, what we really want to see, and we want Michael pursuing under his title, is the commercial industrial growth to help our our tax base. I call it the more desirable tax base because commercial and industrial growth in its area, that's purposeful area, that growth doesn't mean that we have to add on to the schools. We don't have to have more school buses driving around, that type of stuff. The number of hookups that happen for commercial and industrial developments, hookups, I mean water and sewer, is a lot less. You might have a 5-acre parcel that has one business on it that's one water and sewer hookup. If you divide that 5-acre parcel down to even half-acre lots, you got 10 hookups there and that we have to do that manage. So that's why I call commercial and industrial growth a little bit more desirable. And that's another area of Michael's title and what his role is for our community. But he's also here to help make sure that we're doing things smart and we're doing things the way that the citizens of Greenville want, not the way necessarily a developer is going to push on us. So being here tonight really helps us get ahead of them and lets them know, hey, if somebody wants to sell some land to a developer, they should know how they can market it because this is what the people of the community desire for their land. Now, they can market it however they want. It's their land. They've had it for 1 year or 100 years, maybe 150, but it's their land, right? So they need to know what they can do with it when they go out to try to sell it if they want to have it developed. And being here tonight, being part of the community and participating in these events, help you have a voice in how that happens. Keep looking at you, see there's some really good questions. So if you have any more, feel free. I do too, all the time when these come in, and Leanne's great about asking questions too, so.
I was lied to the last time when they said, you know, if we do the development down to Mayflower, we'll run sewer and water right down there.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't know exactly where that water and sewer main runs. I do know that it's from Greenwood, it goes west down Everglade. I do think you're right. As I keep talking, yeah.
But they didn't plan to hook those homes up to that sewer and water system yet. You assessed us.
Right, and that's what needs to happen. We need to have better management around all that and better policies in place so that you as a property owner, when you're going through this, have firsthand knowledge of what's going to happen and don't feel like you're lied to.
I don't know why the developers have to pay for all of that.
Right, and that's exactly what we'd love to have happen is the developers pay for this. And they're really making some good profits. Right. Yeah, that's not right. Right, it's a struggle. Yep. So, any other questions?
Mosquitoes.
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 That's the state bird of Minnesota. They've migrated to Wisconsin a little bit too. Yeah. You got some mosquito issues? If you have mosquito issues, that means we all have mosquito issues. Yeah. So best way to get rid of mosquitoes is make sure you don't have any stagnant water around your property. Many of you have the watershed. Many of you have the watershed. How long has that swamp been there? I like to call it a watershed, but yeah. How long has it been there? Yeah. So who was there first? Probably the mosquitoes. Just guessing. So put up some bat houses, get some bluebird houses out there.
You're talking about walkways. Who's gonna wanna walk through there when you can't even open your eyes?
Yep, mosquitoes, yep.
Right?
So.
All
right, other questions? All right, so Michael, you're gonna put a survey out tomorrow morning, I heard?
Yep, the
Okay.
survey will go out on the website.
Okay. Just a second, Tim. So, yep, so Michael's gonna get things ready for everyone with a survey. Feel free to give your feedback, whether it's on the internet, through an email, or through postal mail, or come in and see Michael. You're here 5 days a week.
5 days a week.
7 to 4:30, Monday through Thursday, and then 8 to noon on Fridays. It's when our staff is here and our village hall is open. It's best if you make an appointment. Michael is not just sitting here waiting for people to come in. He's got other things that he gets to get involved with, including meetings with the county and planning out County Highway CB. So I know that impacts some of you that are here tonight. They're having discussions on what should happen along that route. So yeah, make sure you call and just set up an appointment. That way he knows you're here and he can be prepared for your conversation. I encourage the gentleman that's asking about water and sewer. to work not only with Michael, but with Brian Rickert to see what the plans are for that. If there's anything in what we call our capital improvement projects, the acronym is CIP plan. So we try to do planning 5 years out and beyond on what our projects are going to be so that we can have a budget that is somewhat wavy instead of peaks and valleys. So there's a leveling, so to speak, of what our taxes are. And there's not surprises where you get a big tax year or anything. So there should be projects out there, and that could very well be on there. I don't remember seeing it, but I don't remember everything that happened to me today either. So I'm getting older, and my short-term memory is better than my long-term. Sometimes my long-term is better than my short-term. So, Tim?
Yeah, has there been any discussions with, since to the east of Mayflower is Grand Chute, what Grand Chute's plans are for those properties to the east of Mayflower? And then also for the properties in Greenville on that triangle with the Farmland Preservation Act and the money's coming from that, is that any possibilities to do? I went to the Parks meeting one night and they have no budget to buy anything as far as land-wise and turn it into parks. So I mean, that's kind of not really an option unless it's done by the developer itself or committed by the zoning committee. But what is there any conversations with Grand Chute that what on the other side of Mayflower and how that fits into this triangle and anything?
Michael?
Yep. So we've been, obviously, like I said before, we've been in communication with Outagamie County and Grand Chute with regards to the County Highway CB extension. And I know that Grand Chute is going through an update to their comprehensive plan. I don't recall if it's complete yet, but I believe this area is probably geared for residential, but I don't know for sure. But it would make sense that this far, you know, the area north here would be more residential in nature. I know obviously to the south, you know, by 15 and Mayflower, there's more industrial business park area down there. But I honestly don't know what their future plans call for this specific area, just, you know, east of Mayflower in the specific area in town we're talking about.
Is there a Farmland Preservation Act? Is that possible with this Greenville West?
The purchase of development rights program that we've talked about?
I'm not sure what exact term, right? I know it's some farmland preservation.
Sure. So, I mean, that's a possibility. You know, if we've developed a program to preserve farmland and developed a scoring criteria and an application process. So if landowners are interested in preserving their farmland and getting paid to preserve their farmland into perpetuity, that's something that, you know, we'd love to talk to you about. Right now, the big focus is funding. So we do have a matching grant from the NRCS. It's a 50-50 matching grant. So for every dollar we put in, we get $1 from the federal government to purchase, you know, land rights through easements. However, we are focusing on trying to develop a funding source right now on the villages side. So we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago about that. You'll be seeing more information coming out in the next few months to kind of gauge the public's interest in how we try to fund this program. So it is a program that we are starting to develop, but funding is our main issue right now.
Since all this is so close to the wetland ecosystem, have we had any talks with the DNR about what their regulations are and recommendations are for development so close to the wetland?
Well, we would have to comply with federal and state wetland requirements. That's not my area of expertise. But we do have our own local ordinances that mimic the state and federal regulations. So obviously, whatever is permissible, whatever is prohibited is prohibited. I just don't know the details on all those specifics.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think we will end the formal meeting. Again, I do have, for the people in the house here, I do have these maps and some sticky notes and some pens. If you're interested in providing any written comments tonight to put on these maps, feel free to do so. Otherwise, like I said, you can email me, you can submit something through the mail, or you can go online and use the online mapping survey. to provide those comments. And again, March 4th is the deadline that we're looking to get those comments back by. So you've got a couple weeks to kind of think about it and provide some feedback. So with that, I will end the meeting, close out the online components. And then, like I said, the survey and this presentation will be up on the website sometime tomorrow.